Clutch Radio with Rafi and Dan. Here's Dan Rosenberg and Rafi Manassian.
Hey, welcome. Somehow, once again, it is Saturday.
How did that happen?
7 days, it just keeps happening. I have no idea. But welcome to Clutch Radio. I'm Dan Rosenberg.
And I'm Rafi.
That's Rafi over there. We have got an interesting show today because the fall is coming upon us soon. And last week I mentioned that you always see stories also where people will be like, cars for sale, it's been sitting 10 years, it ran when I parked it.
Yes.
And then you've got to go, so every car ran the last time you parked it, really?
Technically, that's true.
Because at some point, it stops running, but the last time you parked it, it probably did run because that's how you're able to park it.
It's like when you lose something and you always find it in the last place you look, because
exactly.
Why would you look anymore?
Exactly. It's always in the last place you look. So people don't think to do anything when they're going to park a car for a long period of time. Now, a lot of times you don't realize you're going to park a car for a long period of time. A lot of times, when I had my DeLorean, that car, if you didn't do something in 2 weeks, it was dead. Like the battery would always die, even though I had a kill switch on it. I turned it back on. Somehow the battery was still drained.
Sure.
There was always something, or it would start leaking, or that was a quick one. But, sometimes you don't know it's going to sit for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, let alone a few months.
Especially older cars.
Yes.
Older cars don't have the technology and the systems aren't as buttoned up or as tight as newer cars. Newer cars can take a sit for a while and be okay. But even still, the battery is drained, especially with contemporary electronics.
Yeah. And if you have an older car, because typically, people that have the old classics that are taken out to car shows or the Cars and Coffee meetups, those aren't their daily drivers. So with the weather getting nice, or the weather, once it got nice, people bring their cars out. And the weather's about to get crappy in most of the country in the next month or two. And people need to put the car back in the garage. Some people put a cover on it, some people don't. What's your opinion of covers? I know you have an opinion of outdoor covers.
Yes, the outdoor cover I do not recommend at all, because no matter how much the car companies that sell the car covers will tell you, they'll tout them as being safe, as being the best outdoor car cover and all that. If it rains where you are, your car cover will get wet and it will impact your paint when it starts to dry out. Moisture builds up underneath. The car cover conceals the vehicle, makes it ideal for rodents to get in and get comfortable. Spiders, all kinds of things. No matter where you live, you're going to get damage to the finish of your car if you cover it outside. Now, inside your garage, if you want to preserve it for, again, just to prevent dust from collecting on it, you can cover your car. But really, for the most part, unless your garage is getting a lot of action, a lot of activity, kids with bicycles moving in and out, and you want to prevent it from getting scratched, a car cover really isn't necessary inside an enclosed garage. I've had my cars in my garage for years and no covers on them. And that's a personal choice, because when I go into my garage, I like to see my cars. I like to go, wow, look at that car. Wow, that's a good looking car. And also, if I need to, I can dust it off, I can wipe it down, I can take some time cleaning it if it's really that necessary. But for the most part, it's just light dust that collects on a car when it's on inside your garage.
Yeah, and you and I had the experience with that 85 Porsche. What was that, a 928?
Yeah.
What that was?
It was a 928S.
A 928S, and it had been sitting under a cover for many, many years. Yeah. And there was bubbling happening on the paint because it was outdoors in Pacific Northwest weather. So it's moist. There's, moss starts growing on things.
Yep.
So if you do leave your car just sitting outside, obviously you don't want it under a bunch of trees where you're going to get sap all over it. Probably like a carport, maybe one of those little portable things you can get at Harbor Freight Tools or Costco.
Portable
You
carports
need
are
air
good.
circulation.
Make sure that the carport is properly anchored,
Oh
because
yeah.
wind will sometimes pick it up, and you don't want that happening. But properly anchored down, but let the car breathe a little. It's okay. Cars are designed to be outside, but you want to be mindful of them sitting too long, because if they're not out and about and moving periodically, the brakes will get rust on them, and the systems will get pretty pretty corroded rather quickly if you keep it outside in inclement weather.
What's amazing too is brake rotors get rusty very, very quickly. I remember when I was on the retail side of the car business, people would come and they see brakes, a little rust on the rotors. The
Right.
car was, just driven 2 days before, and it
Yeah.
already started showing a little bit of rust. They go, "I need new rotors. I can't." I'm like, "Watch, we'll drive around the block. It'll come back nice and shiny."
Right. Exactly. It's raw, unexposed or untreated steel, which you want that. You don't want anything coating your brakes, because it would impede the performance. So they do pick up surface rust, but within a couple of stops, that surface rust is gone.
Yeah, or one really good one. Just give it a good slam. Actually, one slam actually won't do much. You have to ride the brake a little bit, actually.
Just a little.
So as far as, okay, let's say I don't have this car, but let's say I've got my 1970 convertible that I've been trying to find,
Sure.
my 1970 car.
Okay.
And I've had it to the car shows. We've had it out. It's all, in the spring, I buffed it and polished it. And it's looking great. Did the tune up, did everything it needs. Now it's time. It's October. I'm going to park it for the next 4 or 5 months. Obviously, I don't drain every fluid out of the car.
Not necessary.
Not necessary. What about fuel additives? Do you recommend the enzymes or any of the fuel additives that people sometimes put in the tank?
Yeah, if you're going to keep your car stored indoors in a garage, I recommend that you have at least half a tank of gas in the gas tank, simply because you'll minimize the amount of moisture that will collect inside the tank in the ambient space. And this is, again, in an older car. In newer cars, they're a little more sealed. You don't have to worry about that. But in an older car, you want to tank it up a bit. Half a tank would be the lowest you'd want it to be, up to 3/4 of a tank. And
don't fill it?
I'm sorry?
You don't want to fill it?
You can if you want, but generally speaking, I don't recommend filling the tank and then putting it in the garage, just simply because you have a full tank of gas inside a garage. And, if it's just going to be sitting there, you may want to give it a little bit of atmosphere inside the tank so that the fumes can breathe a little bit more. And they've got some room to move around if they need to for whatever reason. And then all you need to do is, if you decide you're not going to drive the car or start the car for 3 to 4 months, you may want to put in a fuel stabilizer. These are available over the counter. They're small containers, about $5 to $8, depending on the type you get. Put a little in the tank, and you should be good to go. It'll stabilize the fuel, and then when it comes time to use the car, you just burn off the fuel stabilizer. And this is the other reason why you don't want a full tank. With a half a tank and stabilized fuel in it, you can go to the gas station, fill it with fresh fuel, and now you have a mixture of older fuel and fresh fuel, so it makes it a little bit better.
Yeah, that way you have a nice blend of a 2015 mixed with a 2017 gasoline. You got the good vintage.
It's a complex Merlot, Dan.
Yes, very complex. It's got the nose of fuel.
Yes.
Okay, so gasoline's obviously one issue.
Yeah.
Hoses and rubber on the car, sometimes they get dry and brittle. Is there anything maybe you should wipe on those? Put a little something on them to keep them.
Sure. A little silicone dressing is simple enough to do, simple to apply. If the car is stored in the garage, it's going to generally be okay in general temperatures. If it's outside, an average garage, if you live somewhere where you're getting a lot of snow, for example, and 0 to below temperatures outside, your garage is going to be in the mid-40s inside with standard type insulation. So that's perfectly fine for your car. It won't cycle tremendously in the temperatures. So Your hoses and your soft components under the hood, even for an older car, should be okay, but it's perfectly fine to put a little bit of silicone dressing on them to keep them more supple. The problem that happens if the car is stored outside is the hoses will collapse, and they'll tighten up, especially the softer hoses. They'll collapse with the change in the temperature, and you do not want your fluid, your antifreeze, to actually freeze if the coolant is actually too thinly diluted, because most people will recommend a combination of water and antifreeze in your radiator and your coolant system. But I actually recommend closer to an 80% mix, so you have more coolant than water, and you'll want that because it helps to balance out the temperature range for your operating temperatures. Coolant is also a good lubricant. It helps to keep your impeller and your water pump and all the stuff and the inside moving through the water, the cooling jackets. It keeps things nice and lubricated.
Now, do you need to do anything with any of the other fluids? Like, do you need to do anything with the transmission fluid, the brake fluid, the oil,
You want to check
the windshield wiper fluid?
the windshield wiper fluid does have a little bit of antifreeze in it. But again, if your car is being stored in the garage during the winter, shouldn't be a problem. Oil, as long as you check your oil and change it. Many people change their oil before they store their car. It's up to you if you think it's necessary to do that. I don't necessarily time my oil changes because the car is sitting. It's not going to be driving. Some people, when they park their car, if the oil, they will drain the oil, do their oil change, and then when they pour the oil in, they know that it's getting top oiled as it's trickling down, which is sometimes a good thing. And then for your other fluids, brake fluid, as long as you've changed your brake fluid or flushed your brake fluid recently for an older car, and it's good to do that periodically. And if you use the silicone brake fluid, you don't have to worry about moisture buildup when the car is sitting. And then transmission fluid for automatic transmission cars, same thing. As long as you're keeping up in your general maintenance, it's not necessary to have to change those. Now, if we're going to do a long-term storage for a year, 2 years, then it's a whole other series of things that you may or may not want to do. But this whole idea of putting a car up on blocks, people used to do that. They would buy a car, be a long-term project. I'm going to start this when I retire. They park the car, they jack it up, they put it on blocks because they didn't want the tires to compress under the weight of the car.
Yep.
They didn't want the suspension to get, and then they drain the oil, they drain all the fluids, which isn't necessarily a good thing. If you're going to put a car up on blocks, you can keep oil in it, drain the oil out once a year, put new oil in, because it's important, again, to keep it lubricated. If you're not going to start the car, it's a good idea to manually crank the engine or take the spark plugs out and turn it, just so it moves the fluids around and keeps the rings and the cylinder lines, cylinder walls properly oiled.
When I was growing up, my dad had a customer who would buy brand new cars and then put them up on blocks, and he's like, "That's my retirement fund." And he had, and they were all cars from the 70s, and I'm guessing he might still be alive. I don't know. This was 30 years ago that I remember this.
Yeah.
But he had like the Ford Bronco 2 when it first came out, the smaller one. He
Sure.
bought one brand new, it had no miles on it, and he stored it.
Yeah.
It was a Interceptor Ford LTD. He had quite a few cars that he did.
Lots of people, especially in the 70s, if they were paid in cash or if they got cash money, a car is a good place to, let's just say, hide that money. So you buy it for cash, and then you take the car and you park it. And, it's the idea is that because it has no miles or it's essentially brand new, you can get most of your money back out of it. Well, as we know, most of those cars started out here like this, and within the first 10 years, they go down in value, and then they're down, and then they flatten out. And then over time, they start to go up simply because people start to want them. They're harder to find. A low mile or no mile car is pretty amazing. But in the end, you're not making a tremendous amount of money unless you've done that with a car that just happens to be enormously valuable.
Right. But you would think, even a weird one-off, like I just noticed a car on Bring a Trailer the other day. It was like I think a 76, was it a Nova? I think it was a Chevy Nova Concours edition.
Yeah.
It had like 30,000 miles. It was a four-door.
Yeah.
And they had it up on Bring a Trailer. I'm like, I can't see that having a huge return. I mean, I can't imagine anybody's going to really spend a ton of. I think it was at $1,000.
Yeah, it's cars like that. People will buy them just for the novelty of saying, "Look, I've got one of the Concours edition Novas. They built 1,800 of them, and 9 of them are known to exist, and this is the lowest mile one." So, for somebody who wants to have bragging rights when they pull into a local Cars and Coffee, 99% of the population will say, "Oh, look at that old junky Chevy," even though it's in great condition. They just consider that as a no-brainer car. But it's the other 1% of the people that will go up to them and go, "What? Wait a minute! Is that the original paint? Is that the original interior? Is that the?" And that just gets people all excited because when are you going to see another one?
And that's a car right there. Like, how was that stored for so long and have so few miles? And when you look at the pictures, I mean, everything on the car looks brand new because it is.
Sure.
And the only thing that doesn't are like the stickers.
Yeah.
Like the trunk stickers, the engine all the stickers are all warped and weird looking.
Sure.
But I don't know how to store your stickers. I guess that's a whole other show.
Well, there was a car for sale I recently saw. I think it was a Gremlin X, which was actually a pretty rare car with the V8 engine in it. And it one of the features that was shown in the photos was the Nixon for President bumper sticker. Which,
wow.
Was actually still in pretty good shape. You could see the colors and the and that was a big thing, and that was to say this is the car and this is authentic to the era and that sort of thing, and that was a big deal for it.
Yeah.
So, but you were asking about how would you store a car like that Nova with such low miles, and the answer is you don't store it completely. What you do is you park it in a safe and sheltered place, and then you put up a schedule, and once a month you get inside and you start it, or every 2 weeks you get inside, start it, you put it in reverse, take it around the block, drive around, and then keep the fluids going, and then come back in and park it. I had a 1966 Studebaker 4-door sedan with 24 miles. And
24 miles.
24 miles. It was one of those cars that was bought brand new and stored with the idea that it'll be worth something, because at that time Studebaker was going out of business, and this particular person said, "I'm going to buy this one because it's basically the last Studebaker built." So it had 24 miles when I bought it, and I paid $8,000 for it, for a 4-door Studebaker, which was unheard of at the time. This was in the early 80s. And I kept it stored in an enclosed garage, and once a month I would go out, start it, back it out, drive up to the top of the block where I lived at the time, and then put it in reverse and back it back down the block all the way back home and back into the garage. So it kept 24 miles on the car.
Because the odometers do go backwards if you drive backwards on a lot of old cars. People don't realize that in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that should have worked when they had the car in reverse.
Yeah, but that's what I did. And when I went to sell it about 4 years later, I sold it for $8,250 and made $250 for my trouble.
Now, as far as starting a car, this is another issue that I think a lot of people probably need to know about. If you just start your car, get it running, and then turn it off, that's not good for it. You need it to get warm enough and hot enough that you don't get condensation, in the tailpipes, because that's how pipes rust out, if I'm not mistaken. you need it to get hot enough that you don't have a ton of water vapor in your pipes and whatnot. So how many miles, do you think a couple of miles is good, or is it an amount of time? Do you start it up, let it sit for 10 minutes?
Well, it depends on the car. But generally speaking, a good thing to do before you store your car is to make sure that it's had some miles put on it. Make sure it runs well, make sure there's no problems that appear. And then when you go to park it, you can park it knowing that the car is fine, it's safe, it's in good shape, there's no issues with it. Again, if it's an older car and you want to preserve the battery, you can remove the battery terminals, and that way it's not having a static discharge while it sits. A lot of people, they will put a battery tender on the battery just to keep it slowly trickle charging to remove any losses from just the static discharge. But if you do that and then hook the battery back up 3 months later, the car should crank just fine and start with no problems. Now, if you have a modern car, you don't want to necessarily disconnect your battery because you can lose a lot of the settings in your radio and your drive system and things like that. And a lot of cars, contemporary cars, don't like to have their battery disconnected because they'll forget a lot of the codes and a lot of the things that are stored in the system. So you don't want to disconnect your battery on a contemporary car. So just make sure that when you park it, your alternator is working properly and the car is charging. And then if you need to, if the car has trouble cranking when you go to start it, just get a small battery charger starter unit and it'll crank over. And once your car is going, the alternator will take over and do the charging for your battery if there's been any depletion.
Beautiful. So I think that covers how to store a car.
Yeah, and the other cosmetic stuff. If you live in an area where you're concerned about rodents, you can get some of the rodent bags. They're little bags like this with safe chemicals that you can put inside the car. You can stuff them inside under the hood. You can put inside the footwell, and that will inhibit the rodents from coming. The other thing you can do, I have one of these in my garage. It's a unit about this big. You plug it in to the outlet, and it lets out a ultrasonic sound, and you can't hear it. The rodents don't like it, so they stay away. And you know, mice are a big problem. A lot of contemporary cars, they've used soy-based insulation as an environmentally safe thing to do, and it ends up that insulation is sweet and
delicious.
Mice and squirrels and things like that, they love that stuff. So, and it doesn't take long for a mouse to set up a house under your hood. If you're storing your car, within a week, they can do some damage, and they will go into places you can't imagine that they can get, and they'll chew off your insulation, they'll eat up your carpet, and then they'll come bring it back and regurgitate it into a little nest under your hood. And sometimes they'll do that, and they'll make even more mice, and before you know it, they're everywhere.
Yeah, I wonder if that little gadget you have that's putting out that sound, I wonder if what they hear is, there's a cat in here. There's a cat in here. There's a cat in here.
Or the sound is meow, meow.
Yeah. I'm not going in there. I hear there's a cat in there.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say, so does that thing really work? And I was going to say, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, could have gone either way with it. So what about, let's talk about the interior for a second though, like leather seats. I mean, if you have an older car with leather, do you want to condition those every year before you store it, or is that something you do before you take it out?
So
or you do both?
Great question. You know, with a new car, probably once a year. If your car is stored outside and gets a lot of sun or sun exposure, the leather will dry out. So you want to use an appropriate leather conditioner. And there are a number of different types out on the market. You can buy them at any of the typical stores, automotive supply stores. But get a good quality leather conditioner, and and just condition the leather. It's not a difficult process. Some of them come with little leather wipes in kits, and you wipe it down and then buff it with a rag. But make sure you use a good conditioner because it'll keep the leather soft and supple, and the conditioner will help protect it against, it's primarily UV exposure that dries leathers out. And if you park your car in the garage, it's going to have minimal outdoor or sunlight exposure. So it's a little bit better in that regard, but you want to remember to keep it clean, because dust settling on the surface of the leather actually is not good for the leather because it will create a thin film that when you sit on it, it starts to compress the dust, the dirt, and it sort of squishes it into the leather, and it squishes all that dust into the crevices, and that area is hard to clean out as well. So for the interior, that's a good thing to do. A good vacuuming before you store it is a good thing to do, because if you vacuum up all the particulates, there's less likelihood that those are going to create long-term problems down the road. If you happen to be sensitive or allergic to certain things, before you store the car, again, with a good vacuuming and clean out and wipe down and all of that, you may want to have your filter changed so that when you start the car again and start using it more regularly, it's not blowing out all the collected particulates that were previously built up in the filter.
So then I'm guessing that the question of, do you store a car with the windows up or down? The answer would be up.
You know, my preference has always been to store the car with the windows up, but leave a little bit of air to circulate in and out. So a little bit to keep the air moving in and out of the car. And again, it all depends on what your garage situation is. My garage is very well sealed, very well insulated, and I keep it pretty clean in there. So I've kept the windows down on my cars so that they can breathe, because I'm not worried about mice getting in. I'm not worried about, spiders or anything like that. So, yeah.
Well, I think that has given more than enough advice. If you have a car you want to store, go back, listen to the podcast, listen to the entire thing again, and know how to store your car, because there's nothing worse than the car's been sitting and then April or May comes around and you go out and you need to do $4,000 worth of work because the fuel system's bad, or the brake lines are bad, or the belts snap, or something happens that you didn't address when you stored it. Plus, that way, when you do store it and you say ran when parked, it will run when you unpark it. If that's
there you go. And keep in mind, all of these types of things, these considerations, they will vary dramatically from car to car. If you have, for example, if you have a Ferrari Testarossa from 1989 or 90, that's a 12-cylinder engine with synthetic belts, and those belts need to be changed frequently. Well, that tends to be a $12,000 to $15,000 job. Mm-hmm. So that's, that'll scare you. And if you store a Testarossa after you've had the belts done and it sits for too long a time, the belts will develop what's called a cold set. And the cold set, a cold set.
A cold set. If they said sat, well, that sounds odd.
Yeah. So the cold set means that it will settle and the temperatures will get cold and it'll hold that position. So when you go to start it, it's going to still be in that position over that one pulley, and it will not have slacked out, and that causes it to embrittle, and then the embrittling causes you to lose the belt. If you lose a belt in an engine like that, it's pretty disastrous. So if you have a Ferrari Testarossa, be careful with the belt service that you have done on the timing for it. If you're going to store your car before you do your belt service, and then after you're done with the storage of the car, if it's time to do the belts, have it towed or flatbedded to the place that's going to do it, and then empty your wallet of $12,000.
And there you go. I guess if you have a Ferrari Testarossa, 12 grand you can afford.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. At that point, you have to do it. Now, if we want to go to your favorite segment, which is coming up in a moment,
Yeah.
we can talk about how you can get into a classic car that's not necessarily super expensive.
Right.
It is how Rafi goes old school.
Hey, we're going old school today. My favorite segment. Well, there's so many cars to choose from out there, and there are a lot of cars that are not only fun, but inexpensive to maintain, but also simple to use and simple to take care of by yourself. You don't need a lot of complex mechanical tools to get after simple cars that can be a lot of fun. And that's why this week I've chosen the original Mini. The Mini is one of the greatest cars ever developed. And it's not only got such a great following, it's been such a wonderful car for so many years of development. This is a car that was designed and released in 1959 and is still made today. That's how important the Mini is and has been. You can get one from 1960, 1970, 1980, 1990. It just, the list goes on and on and on. So there's so many to choose from. And at any given time, you can get a wide range of types. They come with custom features. You can add lots of different things to them. You can put fender flares on them. You can put rally lights. You can try different two-tone paint and stripe, different wheels and tires. The list goes on and on and on. But they're charged, they're powered by a small 4-cylinder engine packaged up front, and they're mounted sideways. So everything is accessible. The carburetor is accessible. Spark plugs are accessible. It's easy to change the oil. And there's nothing complicated. There's no frame. They've got a solid floor panel. It's a unibody construction. Suspension is easily accessible. Brakes are very basic. And the upside on these cars is there's so many to choose from and so many varieties of Minis to choose from that they're inexpensive. You can get a nice running one for $10,000 to $15,000. It might need a little bit of work. That's perfectly fine. You can get beautiful ones, some of the earlier ones too, for $20,000 to $25,000, and a really nice show quality Mini that might be rare, might be over $25,000. So for about 10 to 15 grand, you can get into a really nice one. You can do all the modifications, changes, improvements, things that you want to do. You can take the formerly 40 to 60 horsepower engine, and you can upgrade the engines, get 75, 80, 100 horsepower. There are some Minis that people have taken the engine out completely and put in contemporary engines that have 200 horsepower. And there are people that have done mid-engine Minis. There are all kinds of different types and customs and resto mods for the Mini Cooper, which was the slightly sportier version, and all the way up to a contemporary Mini, which started manufacturing under the BMW brand. And the contemporary Mini, you can get a very nice, mildly used one all day long for under 10 grand.
Now, there are different names of the Mini, though, because there's Austin, there's Morris. Like, what is are these different companies that came out with their own version of the Mini, or were these companies that evolved? I know BMW owns Mini Cooper now.
So it's a great question. The car was designed and built by BMC, British Motor Car, I believe is the name of it. And the manufacturing, the principles, all of the stuff associated with it was licensed out to different car companies. So Morris did them, Austin did them. They put their drivetrain in them. They did their special touches. Grill might have been modified. Other features might have been different. And it was even made in Italy under the Innocenti brand. So there's quite a few of them. There are, I believe, South American ones made under a different brand. Um, so there are quite a few that have been made, but in the annals of automotive history, the Beetle and the Mini and the Citroën 2 Chevaux or 2CV, these three cars have really led the world in volume production for small cars. There's one on Hemmings.
Look at the price of that one.
That's their asking price?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a while for that one. Now that might be that's a first series or Mark 1, and it may be fully restored, like to show winning standards.
Yes.
Okay. So again, for my taste and my use, I would never purchase a car like that because I just can't use it. There's no driving circumstance where I'm going to enjoy that. If I got a car that was just nicely prepared that I can drive and enjoy it, that's fantastic. But this is a car that I'm sure if you looked under the car, you'd see a perfect vehicle entirely. It would be fully restored. Yeah, there you go. And for somebody who wants the very best, the most pristine, if they want to spend that kind of money for it, go for it. But for the most part, if you want to drive and enjoy a Mini, you can get a really nice one for 20 to 25 grand and drive to your heart's content. Small wheels and tires. I'll say that about the Mini. It's one thing that you need to be aware of is it will drive like a little car, and the quality, the driving quality of these cars were so good that young people who got a hold of them would drive them to their absolute limits because they were almost impossible to flip. So you could corner, with a properly tuned Mini, you could corner as well as any Porsche or any Ferrari. The only reason why you didn't beat those faster cars was because you had limited horsepower. So if you were able to get a little more horsepower out of your engine, you could compete with any Porsche or many other performance cars that were much faster because these cars could corner like banshees.
Yeah.
Lot cars.
And a lot of people did some customizations to these cars.
Absolutely.
There's one there.
Yeah, the Mini is like the Volkswagen because for such a long time they were so cheap and virtually available everywhere because they made them by the tens of thousands. They've been the subject of lots of comedic customizations. There's famous ones that have been fiberglassed into giant shoes. There's some that have been cut in half. So you have two fronts put together on the car. There's Mr. Bean. Mr. Bean himself, by the way, is a bit of a car enthusiast. He is most well known for having wrecked his $1 million McLaren twice, not once. Twice. Yes. Yeah. But the Mini is a great car, wonderful automobile, lots of fun, easy to use, easy to maintain. Nobody hates them. Everybody who sees them falls in love with them. And again, you don't have to get an old one. You can get a 15 to 20-year-old BMW Mini. And those will be, again, under $10,000 with wonderful finishes, great miles and use remaining on them, and lots of charm, lots of driving value in them.
And I've got to say, nobody drives it better than Mr. Bean. He makes driving funny. I would say, especially his Mini. Now, if you have any questions about buying or selling cars, classic or new, or maintenance or anything, or if you want to try to stump Rafi, by all means, please put something in the comments. We see Jake says hello, guys. So hi,
Jake. I got an email 2-3 days ago asking me about how do I buy a classic car that is far away from me. This particular buddy of mine that was, he lives in Chicago, but he was looking at a car that a guy has for sale in Texas. And his first question was, do you know anybody in Texas that can go look at this car for me? And I said, well, I know a lot of people that can go there and take a look at it for you. But what you want to do under those circumstances is, if it's a car that's something you are going to spend a fair amount of money on, you can hire somebody to do what's called a pre-purchase inspection. And there are a lot of good services and systems out there that will dispatch an expert in your car, and they'll go out, they'll take a look at the car, they'll have a checklist, and they'll go through, make sure everything works on it, headlights, turn indicators, all that stuff. And they'll also check the general condition of the car. They might ask the owner to show the receipts for work that's been done. Depending on the extent of their inspection, it could be anywhere from $150 to $300. And that's good insurance if you're buying a car that's rather expensive or might be expensive to maintain. Your first repair bill for something that you didn't expect could be, $800 to $1,000. So $250 to $300 is a general amount you might pay. I've done some specialty inspections myself for people that are looking at higher value vehicles, and those can be anywhere between $500 and $1,500 for the inspection. But those inspections are more complete. I'll look at a lot more details under the hood. I'll ask about the engine numbers. I'll ask a little bit more documentation, things like that. And it's important to do because if your eyes aren't able to see the car in person, it's going to be hard to make a decision to spend a fair amount of money, especially on an older car.
Right. Of course, now we've got FaceTime and Zoom, and people can digitally go look at a car, but sending an actual person to touch it, feel it, because cars can look really good.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then when you actually see them, you're like, ooh.
Yeah.
It's like online dating. I mean,
Sure. Well, in the industry, we say, well, that car will image up really nicely.
Now, here's a question. Jake put something in the comments that I want to bring up, but first I want to ask your opinion.
Sure.
Of that.
Okay. So this is a big Cadillac convertible. This is, I'm going to say a 72?
It's actually a 70.
70, okay.
It's the criteria of what I'm looking for.
So this is a car that you'll find pretty much everywhere available. And the challenge with these cars is the range of condition. They were bought brand new by people who enjoyed driving them and generally took good care of them. But when their value dropped dramatically, they went off at a very cheap price to people who either just drove them into the ground or didn't take care of them very much, or found that they were enormously expensive to maintain. I mean, that bumper alone, if you have to re-chrome that bumper, that's going to cost you about $4,000.
Wow.
So they are expensive automobiles to maintain. This one looks like it probably was more recently painted. The exterior looks good and shiny. The tires look fairly new. The chrome looks decent from a distance, and the interior is probably okay. White leather interior is hard to keep nice, so if it's the original interior, more power to them. These tend to be about the price of the restoration or the price of the original condition of it. And my guess is you probably could get something like this. This car might be fairly priced at, I'll say, 12 to 15 grand.
Oh, interesting. This one's actually, they're asking $7,500.
It probably needs a lot of work. My guess is it needs anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000 worth of work, like right off the bat at that price.
Yeah.
So, and if Dan was looking to buy a car like this, I would say, Dan, let's go find you one that is in nicer shape, that has been better maintained, and we'll chase that one down.
Well, this one, the guy says it runs great, needs a few things, but a nice car for the price. Hate
Sure.
to sell her. I have too many projects. I'm firm on the price. No room for negotiations. Too much invested.
There's
So
no room.
that means he just found out it needs something really expensive and he doesn't want to put any more money into it.
That is exactly right. That is what it means. And when they say no room for negotiations, if you show up with $7,400, my guess is you're going to buy that car anyway.
Yeah.
But they're saying no room for negotiations simply because they want people coming to buy the car without the notion that they're going to offer $6,000.
Yeah.
But here's a good thing to think about when you go to look at a car like this. Look at where it's parked. It's outside. It's obviously got some moss on the ground, so that means there's going to be some work that's going to need to be done underneath the car. It's a convertible, and a convertible in wet weather tends to not do really well. It might be that this car was unable to even fit in this person's garage. So you want to be careful with stuff like that. But my guess is this is a car that's going to need almost immediately to be satisfying driving. It's going to need somewhere between probably $3,000 and $5,000 worth of work. So you're better.
And the fact that this is where they took the picture of the car tells you that, you know, it's not, if it was in a garage, they would have had at least one picture of it, you know, being stored, like you said.
Yep.
And if it's parked in a nice park on the grass, if they did something more of a beauty shot, then you don't know. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is lipstick on a pig, most likely.
And the paint is probably, if you did the paint more recently, it's probably a good quality Mako job, and Mako does a great job painting cars. They're not hiding anything. But if there was light surface rust in some areas that wasn't properly treated, the paint will cover that for about 6 months to a year, and then it'll appear, and your beautiful paint job will need to be redone. So always be cautious about cars like this that look great on the surface, but you got to dig deeper and you got to check more closely. Otherwise, the phrase I've used many times is you're buying problems.
Yeah. And I definitely would have done white walls, not black walls on this car.
White walls would absolutely change the look of the car. Not too broad. You don't want them to be too big because then it changed the look of the car. But even small banded white walls would help the look of it.
Yeah, just your standard white wall.
Yeah.
All right. So Jake, our friend Jake, puts in here for old school. You shared a story on our Cars and Coffee the other day, and he would love you to tell that story.
Okay.
About when you were a child and a car drove by in Santa Monica.
Yeah. So
it is touching, by the way. You'll tear up. Go on.
If you can, while I'm telling the story, Dan, if you're able to find some images, that would be great. So my family moved to our house in Santa Monica. We had an apartment for many years. And finally, when my mom and dad were able to raise some money, we bought a house in Santa Monica. And we moved in the house in 1968. So by around 1970, I had my own bicycle. I had a metallic green Schwinn Stingray, and my parents allowed me to ride it up and down the sidewalk in front of our house. We lived on a corner, so there was a main street going one direction, another going the other, and I would ride my bike up to the corner and just sit there watching cars go by and wait to look at the cars, and always interested in automobiles and looking at things. And then I'd get on my bike, ride back down, ride back up again, just being a kid. So one day I'm out there and I rode up to the corner, and I can hear in the distance really loud. And I'm like, what is that? And waited, looking down the corner of the street, and up here it comes, and it's a Cobra. And the Cobra comes rumbling up to the corner. And I'm standing there leaning over, and the guy's driving. He's got gloves, like driver's gloves on, and sunglasses. And he looks at me, and I look at him, and he goes like this, gives me like that. And off he goes. And I go, wow. And I'd hear, run, run, sports car, a big height of my day, right? And I'm a kid. What am I doing? I'm just waiting for Scooby-Doo to come on later in the day. So I couldn't believe it. I rode my bike back down, jumped into the house, told my mom I want to wait for that car to come back. So my mom made me a sandwich, brought it out to me while I was waiting. I waited, I don't know how long, but I knew he was going to come back. And sure enough, he turned around, and I could hear him coming, and here he comes up to the same on the same street the other direction, and he sees me looking again, and this time instead of hauling away, he pulls over, and I see him standing at the car. He gets out of the car, and he goes, and he hands me a little card, and he goes, "Here, kid," he said, you like cars? Have your old man come by my place, and you can take a look at them." Oh, okay. So I took the card, and it had an address on it. That's all it had, was an address. And so later that day, I told my dad, I said, he's got a really cool car. It was a sports car. It's a Cobra. And my dad said, "Well, Cobra, well, okay." And so to my dad's credit, he didn't brush it off, and he knew I liked cars. So that weekend, we drove over there. It wasn't far from where we lived. So we got there, parked the car, and we're walking down the driveway, and my dad is looking around, and he's holding my hand, and I can look around. I'm looking around. I can see things, and my dad says, "Wow, this is a pretty nice place." So we go to the front door, knock on the door, and some guy answers the door, and it's not the guy that was in the car, and he says, "Okay, go down to the garage. You'll find him there." I go, "Oh, okay." So we walk around, go around the corner. The garage door is up, and there's the guy standing there, and I can feel my dad's hand get super tight around mine, and he pulls my hand back and stops me and leans down. He goes, "That's Steve McQueen." And I go, "Oh, okay, Dad, am I in trouble?" And he goes, "It's Steve McQueen." And sure enough, there's his Cobra. And I said, "Oh, okay." I didn't know who Steve McQueen is or was. I'm just a kid. I'm sure I might have seen one of his movies at that point, but so we walked over, and he sees us, and he goes, "Hey guys," and we're walking over to the garage, and my dad immediately starts, "Oh, Mr. McQueen, it's just what a pleasure you're moving." And he goes, No, none of that. We're here for the kid." He says, "That's just not. We're not talking about any of that." And I just, oh, okay. And so then he takes me and he shows me around his garage, and it's a big garage, and he's got a Jaguar there, he's got the Cobra there, he's got a Ferrari, he's got like a bunch of motorcycles lined up. And I just remember as a kid, because I'm little, I'm right up to there's this Jag in an XKSS. My eye line comes right up to the handlebars on the motorcycles, and there's pictures on the wall of him racing motorcycles, and I remember that he was hard of hearing because he would, when he spoke to me, he'd get really close so he could hear. And I didn't know, of course, at the time that he was hard of hearing, but I remember that hearing that later, thinking, "Oh, that's why, because it was hard for him to hear." But he took me around and he showed me all the cars. He let me sit in the Jag, and I played with the steering wheel. And of course, my dad, he didn't think anything of it. He didn't bring a camera or anything like that. Why would you? You're just going to go see some cars. But my dad was like, "Oh, could we get a picture?" He goes, No, none of that. He says, "Just, let the kid enjoy the cars and all." And, he didn't want to like sign any autographs or anything like that. And I know my dad asked, because that's, he was so starstruck. But to me, he was just a guy with a Cobra. And I think that was part of the reason why he allowed me to come see his place, was because I didn't know who he was. It didn't matter to me who he was. But in later years, I've told that story a few times for friends and car buddies. And it's nice because, Steve McQueen gets a lot of press for being a car guy. His cars, when they do sell, they sell for a lot of money. And it's not just because he was a car guy from an iconic era. It's because he was a nice guy. He was a genuine person. He was a real enthusiast. And I always remember him for being super nice to me that day.
I told my wife that story, and honestly, I got teary-eyed almost, because you realize this is why you're such a car guy. That moment of your childhood, had that not happened, that might have put you in a totally different trajectory.
It's true, but I mean, that was one of the first instances that I had where cars seemed to matter to somebody. And I remember coming away from it thinking, wow, my dad, I'd never seen my dad like that. To see your dad get so worked up over something like that, what's dad so excited about it? Who's this McQueen guy? And, I remember the name and thinking, McQueen, what does it even, it didn't even matter to me. He was a race car type driver in a super cool car. And that's all I cared about, the sound of it, and that's ultimately what I think he cared about, was that we were just connecting on a car level. And that's been my experience with all the people I met in the car world, including, and I met a lot of really wonderful people, Phil Hill, Carol Shelby, Dan Gurney, Pete Brock, all of these guys, because they know that I'm genuinely interested in the cars and what they've done with cars. And that's their passion. So we share that. I'll save the other story. I have a great story about how I met Jay Leno before he was hosting the Tonight Show.
Oh,
yeah. And
that for next time.
I'll save that one for next time. But
even the story you and Glenn Munger shared on our call about how you got to Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
For the first time with one of your cars.
Yeah.
And you have since been a judge at Pebble Beach.
That's right. Also, with Glenn's encouragement. Yeah.
It's all just about the passion for cars. And car guys, car guys and comedians have a lot in common, because when you meet another comedian, you have an immediate bond. Musicians are the same way too. You meet another musician, you have an immediate bond. Car people, a lot of the pretense and a lot of the, you could have a guy that's got a $100 million car collection and a guy that's got his first car that he's collecting, and they can talk on an equal level.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. And
you know what it comes down to? It's that car guys, musicians, comedians, this is, believe it or not, it's not an easy thing to do. The car guy thing, it seems like it would be easy to do, just be interested in cars.
Right.
There's a lot of sacrifice. There's a lot of time. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of effort. You're managing an enormous vehicle, sometimes 2 or 3 of them, and you got to fit it in your life. You got to make it work. So it's hard work to get it all together. Same thing with being a comedian. That's hard work. You got to figure out how to do it. You got to be weird for a long time. You got to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. And same thing with a musician. To be a musician, to hone your craft, to get really good as a musician is only one aspect of it. You got to be able to perform. You got to be able to bring it when the time comes. And so that kind of familiarity, and this is why you find a lot of car people are performers, because they work very hard at what they do, and the car is a bit of a relief from having to be on all the time, which is why guys like Jay Leno or Steve McQueen, who are real car guys, they don't want to be on all the time. They look at the car as an authentic place to exchange things with other people who are genuine about their interests.
Right, and sometimes the car is the celebrity.
Yeah.
Than them. Like, Jay Leno drives in a really loud, flashy car. A lot of people notice the car, and it's not so Jay's like, hey, look at me. It's almost a deflection. Like, look at my car.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know when I had my DeLorean, it was like going out with a celebrity, because every time I went to get gas, it would take an hour to talk to people, and I love talking to people about it.
Yeah,
part of what does it.
That's absolutely, that's part of the experience, is having something unique. And it's the same thing when you're a comedian. You're able to bring something unique to a group of people, and people want that. People want that kind of unique experience. So, because they go away and they go, oh my gosh, you'll never see what I saw, or believe what I saw at the gas station. They'll take a picture of it. They'll show their friends. They'll post it on Instagram, whatever it might be. But it's the same sort of that enthusiastic experience of look what I saw, or look what it's very human.
Yeah. There was nothing cooler than somebody tagging me on Instagram when someone else took a picture of me driving my car.
Yeah.
And they knew by the fluxing license plate that it was mine. They're like, hey, look, somebody spotted Dan out in the wild.
There you go.
So, and I think cars and music and comedy, and Jake mentions auto racing.
Yeah.
It's not something you can do alone. Those are all things that you need support from friends and family to be able to do. Because if you're going to spend the money to collect cars or even collect a car that's not your necessary car, I mean, if it's not your daily driver, it's like, why would you have another car?
Yeah, and to many people, it's a bit of a weirdness. They don't get it, and that's one of the things that I've worked really hard on is explaining to people how the collection hobby and how the car aspect is more than just a car. You know, I collect cars, or I'm involved in cars because they're exciting, they're interesting, they do a lot for me. But realistically speaking, it's a great way to jump in the sandbox with a bunch of other similar people and, play with our toys.
Yeah. Speaking of our toys, we haven't done gas prices yet, and that's how we end the show.
We should do it.
An hour. I mean, it's amazing when I get you talking, the show goes by like that. And we have to mention too, I mean, if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see this, but Rafi now no longer has the beard. Now his hair has been cut. This is the Rafi that we knew originally, and then we introduced this whole new Rafi to the world as we were doing this show. But yeah, let's talk about the gas price.
How much is gas where you live?
Now, other than Mississippi, Rafi,
Other than Mississippi,
who would you say is the second lowest price of gas in the entire country?
second lowest price of gas in the entire country, I am going to go with the state of Indiana.
Who?
Indiana.
Oh, I thought you said India. I go, that's not a country.
It is a country. It's not a state.
I mean, that's not a state. That's a country. Indiana is way. Let me find them.
Wow.
How are they not on this list? That's not possible. Wait, are they literally not on this list?
That's a state.
213.
For a minute, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is Indiana not a state anymore?
I thought Indiana, maybe they don't report their prices. Maybe there's something.
Maybe they inhaled Illinois, or Illinois inhaled Indiana.
Indiana's way down at 213. Second place this week is Texas at $1.90.
$1.90 in Texas. Wow. What's Montana? Just out of curiosity.
Montana is. Where are they? Oh, 225.
Wow, that's high.
Yeah. The Gulf Coast states all have the lowest again. Pennsylvania is an outlier in the Northeast. They have the highest price of all the Northeast states.
Pennsylvania tends to have higher fuel costs. I've never been able to figure out why, but they do have higher
state taxes.
Yeah.
The cheapest premium is in Oklahoma.
Oh, that's okay.
And the cheapest diesel is in Missouri, or Missouri, as some people say.
Missouri is particularly low fuel costs generally, I believe.
Yeah, overall they're not too horrible. $1.93 for regular, $2.18 for mid, $2.44 for the premium.
There you go.
And here in Washington, we are again very highly priced as far as the country is concerned.
Yeah.
We're at 283.5, which is down from 283.6 yesterday. A month ago, we were 280, so we're up from a month ago. A year ago, we were 320. Still quite a ways down from a year ago. And of course, the eastern part of the state is super cheap. Spokane is 257. And Jefferson County is 295.
Wow.
King County is the highest in the state at $3.
$3.
I take that back. Pacific County is at $3.04. So there you go.
There you go.
There are your gas prices, which I don't know about anymore because I drive an electric.
So there's yeah, that's right. You don't buy gas anymore. How long has it been since you bought gas?
The last time I bought gas was when did I sell the car? I put some gas in a few days before I sold it. So is that July?
Wow.
Yeah, and I just got my plates for the electric car, and it's very exciting when a plate comes in and you don't order a custom plate. but I got the word buy, B-U-Y, as my first three. And people were like, "Oh, did you pick that on your own?" I'm like, no, because I was going to have one of like buy cars was going to be the one I was going to actually get, but it's buy and then four numbers. So
Now I got a let's see here. I got $4.03 per gallon as the average price for California fuel today. I just did a quick search.
wow.
$4.03 a gallon. That's amazing because that's double the price of what you pay for it in Texas.
Well, what part of California? Because if you take the whole state, yeah, it's only 323. But if you go into Los Angeles, San Luis Obispo is at 338.
Yep. Northern.
Mono, I don't even know where Mono is. That's $4.10 in Mono.
You don't want to get mono.
Yeah, Napa's 340, Humboldt 346, Del Norte 339, Trinity 355. That's just for the regular.
Mm-hmm.
So gas is still pricey.
Yeah, it's you know, and it's going to continue. People think gas prices are going to go lower. I think gas prices are going to actually go higher. State's average in California is up 44 cents. So yeah, I think.
Well, also this weekend is usually the weekend where gas prices start to go back up because they dropped usually for the summer. Supply and demand also determines it. I think supply and demand might cause it to go down if we get the pandemic sending people back to their houses for November, December, and holiday travel is limited.
Yep, I think it's not only. Oh, I think it's not.
We'll continue tracking it. And you were going to say?
I think you know, think about it. All these kids are staying home, and that means they're not going to be going to school. So moms and dads are not taking their kids to school. School buses are not running. They use fuel, and that fuel consumption adds up very quickly. No kids going to soccer games. No kids going to driving their own cars to various events. So fuel prices have got to come down in the fall.
And there we go. Well, that is somehow the show again.
There you go.
Season 3, episode 2 is in the books. If you are listening to the podcast, check us out live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. And yeah, I guess that's it. If you have any questions during the week, you can send them to me, dan@danrosenberg.com. You can send them to Ralph if you know his email address, because he gets some questions. And I guess we'll be back next week.
Yeah, look at us.
All right, that's it for Clutch Radio. I'm Dan.
And I'm Rafi.
And we'll see you next time.